Hare Krishna, bro. Okay, okay, thanks. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Bhashatya Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Gopinath Shri Radhe Jaya Radha Madhava Shri Radhe Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Mai Jaya Sudarshana Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naranchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tado Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloker Bhaktir Bhavati Naishaki Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatkrapa Tamaham Mande Shri Gurum Dinatharinam Paramanandama Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. So we are continuing our Bhagavatam scripture study. We have finished. We are in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th chapter, first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Krishna's entrance into the Dwarka. So we have finished until verse 21. So we are continuing with verse 22. Verse 22. The Almighty Lord greeted everyone present by bowing his head, exchanging greetings, embracing, shaking hands, looking and smiling, giving assurances and awarding benediction even to the lowest in the rank. So Krishna now enters Dwaraka. As we all know, he is returning from Hastinapur. He has left Hastinapur and he is now entering into Dwaraka. So this particular scene is explained of Krishna entering into Dwaraka. So there are different kinds of people, different grades of people in different relationship with the Lord. So accordingly, Krishna is, reciprocating with each and everyone. We saw in last week's class, the last shloka, we saw how Krishna reciprocates personally with every living entity. There is no impersonalism, directly, physically, directly, he, personally, he relates with everybody. So here we see that expansion of that verse where there is a more detailed explanation that Krishna, for elders, who's elder to him, Krishna showed respect by bowing his head. And then, for his friends, he exchanged greetings and hugged them, shaking hands. And then, for people who below them, he gave benedictions to them. So Srila Prabhupada, when he writes in the purport, starting from his spiritual master Gargamuni, all the way to the prostitutes and the chandalas who have come there, Krishna was reciprocating with everybody. It doesn't matter what is their social background, what is their position, but according to the relationship they perceived with Krishna, Krishna reciprocated. That is true even with every living entity, even with a living entity existing in the material world. So we see that, in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Krishna entered into the arena, how everybody looked at him. Somebody saw him as a nice, beautiful boy, and, somebody saw, oh, is he such a young boy? How is he going to fight? And then Kamsa saw him as death, and, Krishna reciprocated in each with each one of them in whatever way they wanted to relate to Krishna. So here also we see that very similar, verse, that Krishna reciprocates with each one of us in a very particular way. So this is a very wonderful verse because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is ready to reciprocate. This is not only true for the living entities living in the spiritual world or in Dwarakadam, but it is true even for the material living entity. The living entity wants to forget Krishna, and Krishna creates a situation where the living entity to forget it. So even our forgetfulness is possible only because Krishna allows it. Whatever we want, Krishna is allowing that to happen. So we want to forget Krishna, he creates a material world, he creates a material body, he creates everything so that we can forget it. And the same living entity, when he wants to turn his face and look at the Lord arranges for that as well. Text 23. Then the Lord personally entered the city accompanied by elderly relatives and invalid brahmanas with their wives, all offering benedictions and singing the glories of the Lord. Others also praise the glories of the Lord. So here we see that specifically the brahmanas are mentioned. The brahmanas, the Lord, accompanied by the brahmanas. So Prabhupada in the purport, he writes about how the brahmanas, they are not existing to just make money. Actually, Brahmana never saves money there. He doesn't worry about the future. He lives on a day-to-day basis because he's completely dependent on the Lord. And the only purpose of a Brahmana is to glorify the Lord. And here we see that that's what the Brahmanas were able to do, and that's why it was specifically mentioned. So, given that Vaishnavas are living above Brahmanas, right? We are all getting, second initiated because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur through Shastra proved a Vaishnava is higher than a Brahmana. It doesn't matter, what caste or kula he was born in. As long as he's a devotee, he is much higher. So that means our character also has to be higher. So it means that even Vaishnava means we are not attached to money. If we are very attached to money, we cannot call ourselves a devotees, right? So Prabhupada writes, Brahmanas were never attentive to banking money for future retired life. So that doesn't mean that we will not save money or we will not keep money for ourselves, but we are not attached to it. Meaning, whatever Krishna has provided us, we are happy with that, and then within that we try to make our life. If Krishna gives us more, we will engage it in the service of the Lord. If he takes it away from us, we will, even in that situation, we'll be happy. We see that Srila Prabhupada, in his initial days, he was very successful in his business. But in the later days, Srila Prabhupada's business went down. It went down very badly. And Srila Prabhupada always took it as a mercy of the Lord. Right? So Prabhupada is a pure devotee. Krishna could have made everything easy for him, but he wanted to use a devotee to set us an example. Like same with the Pandavas. They were the Rajasvi Yajna, all the kings came and bowed down before King Yudhishthira. And later, even his own wife was, disrespected and they were thrown to the forest. So we should, be open to both kind of situations. Text 24. When Lord Krishna passed over the public roads, all the ladies from the respectable families of the Dwaraka went up to the roofs of their palaces just to have a look at the Lord. They considered this to be the greatest festival. So we were talking about how, the women folks in Hastinapur, they were also looking from the top of the palaces at Krishna. And here a very similar sentiment is explained that all the Dwaraka women, they also went to the top because, as I said, respected women were not seen on the streets of the road, right? That was the culture in olden days. COVID has actually, it's a very funny situation because generally people, will travel only if it is necessary, particularly women. So COVID-19, all the roads were empty. Everybody was locked inside the house. Only necessity you go out. So those days it was a normal habit, right? So anyway, here, it was a great festival time for Dwaraka, right? Because it was a festival time, they came to the roofs. Otherwise, even there, they wouldn't have come. So they all came to the top of the palace, and from there they were looking. And we saw how, as long as Krishna is there, in the spiritual world is Nitya Mahotsava, everyday festival. Yeah, here also it says Tadikshana Mahotsavaha. Even looking at the Lord, they consider it as a big festival. And Srila Prabhupada talks about how this idea of deity worship in being done in the temple is done in a very similar mood. The Acharya establishes the deity and the devotees worship it. They should have this mood that when they enter the temple, we are actually attending a big festival. So devotees ask, some devotees ask, we grow up in a very isolated environment. We are not, we don't go out, we don't socialize with people, we don't go to parties and everything. For a devotee, every day is a party. Every day it is a festival. Every time we go to the temple to have darshan of the Lord, it's a festival for us. And that's the sentiment Srila Prabhupada talks about in the purport of this. That this is not an idol worship, but rather Krishna and Radharani are personally present. Radha Gopinath is personally present. And every day we go to a temple is actually festival for us. Text 25. The inhabitants of Dwaraka were regularly accustomed to look upon the reservoir of all beauty, the infallible Lord. yet they were never satisfied. So from now on, as we go, the mood and the philosophy of pure devotees and their relationship with Krishna will be very deeply explained in this particular chapter. Because if you think about it, the questions that Suta Goswami asked was about Parikshit Maharaj. How was he born, how he became a king, and how he ruled, and how in what circumstances he gave up everything and he went to the forest. And in answer to that question, when answering to that question, here, we were talking about how, after the war, how Parikshit was born, how Parikshit was saved during the Hastinapur, after the war, Ashwatthama, when he sent the, Brahmastra, how he was saved by Krishna, that was talked about. And then later on, then it was talked about how, the Pandavas, made Krishna stay a little longer because Yudhishthira was heartbroken. So these are all background to Parikshit becoming a king, right? Because it's about the end of the Pandavas' reign and the beginning was Parikshit Maharaj. So that was the correlation. So then why are we having one chapter particularly about Krishna entering into Dwaraka? Is because Bhagavatam is about the Lord. So you will see that throughout Bhagavatam, even though it talks about various other pastimes, there is always some link into the pastimes of Krishna. So here in Pandavas, in the next few chapters, we see about how Krishna left the material world, and then when Pandavas heard that, it was time for them to retire. And why that is explained, because only if the Pandavas retire, Parikshit can become a king. So that was the flow of the chapters. But in between, we have this particular chapter about only Krishna. It just explains Krishna entering into Dwaraka, because it talks about that, because there is so much, beauty in the pastimes of the Lord, that it is inserted everywhere that is possible. That's why Bhagavatam is very special. Even though it talks a heavy philosophy or any other pastime, still you will see that some way or other it's always related with Krishna. So yesterday also we were talking, today morning we were hearing the Bhagavatam class, how, the rishis were asking Suta Goswami, everybody was asking how, Parikshit Maharaj, why he did not, punish the Kali, right? And then at the end of the verse, after asking that question, they are saying, these are all related to Krishna, so you please explain. Right? So that is why, you see this chapter that is, even though it talks only about Krishna entering Dwaraka, it has huge philosophy explained in it. As we go, we'll see. So here, in this first verse, it talks about how the inhabitants of Dwaraka, they were basically, looking at Krishna as if, he's new. So every time they look at it, he's new. This is the difference between spiritual life and material life. Spiritual life, there is no end to the taste. Whereas in material life, anything becomes, boring after some time. That's the difference between material happiness and spiritual happiness. In material happiness, for example, somebody wants to achieve something. I want to buy a car, new Mercedes or BMW, whatever is the best car in the world. So I, earn very hard, and then I get the car and I drive it. There's a lot of satisfaction, happiness in it. No denying that there is no happiness in it. But the happiness derived from that activity stays only for a few days. Right? Maybe it will stay for 1 week. So some people, it may stay for 1 month. But at the end of the day, after some time, you don't feel it. It's just an old car. It becomes an old car. Same thing with everything. Anything becomes old. But whereas in spiritual world, it's the other way around. See, every day they see Krishna. Every day they talk with Krishna. Every day there are pastimes of Krishna, and these same pastimes happen again and again and again. But the more and more and more they participate, it looks newer, and more level of happiness, the more level of realization is what they get. And that's what is explained in this verse. And Srila Prabhupada also talks about this, that the law of satisfaction acts materially, but there is no scope for it in spiritual realm. This idea of, satisfying for some time, or, this, in the spiritual world, there is no question of satisfaction. There is no satisfaction. That it's about happiness. In material world, it's about satisfaction. Satisfaction means I get what I want. That's it. That's the maximum we can have in material world. But in spiritual world is about real happiness. And then not only happiness, it talks about ananda, right? Prabhupada translate Ananda as bliss, right? Bliss means unending happiness, and the intensity of the happiness is very strong. So that's what it talks about, in this verse. So text 26. The Lord's chest is the abode of the goddess of fortune. His moon-like face is the drinking vessel for the eyes which hanker after all that is beautiful. His arms are the resting places for the administrative demigods, and his lotus feet are the refuge of the pure devotees who never talk or sing of any subject except his lordship. Now, the beauty of the Lord is explained in this verse. And, how once somebody gets related to Krishna, there can be nothing that can give them happiness. That's why, Rupa Goswami says, don't go to the other side of Yamuna. He wants, right? Because the moment you go to the other side of Yamuna, there is this boy with, the Tribanga form, bended in, crooked in three places. And the moment you look at him, you will lose your, interest in anything else. This is a reality. Nobody can escape this. There is a Leela in the pastime of, here the beauty of the Lord's eyes are explained. There is a pastime of Ramanujacharya. One day Ramanuja along with his disciples were going. So at that time there was this wrestling man. He was a wrestling champion, WWF champion those days. He was a huge wrestling champion, a great Kshatriya. So but he was very addicted to his girlfriend. He had he was enamored by her beauty. So he would serve her all the time. When she walks out, he'll hold a umbrella and then walk so that the sun will not burn and all those things. And anybody who sees that, they used to make fun of him, because those days particularly, a man is not supposed to be, serving a woman. It was the society in Varnashram Dharma, it's very strict. It's the men who will be served by the women, right? So that's how the system was. And here it was the other way around. He was serving his wife. And then everybody used to make fun of him. So as one day, as Ramanuja and his disciples, they were walking by, they saw this, there was a huge crowd that has gathered to wish Ramanuja and take his darshan. And in that crowd, this lady has come, to take darshan of Ramanujacharya because she has heard about the Lord, about the Acharya. So she was there standing in the crowd as Ramanuja walked, and he saw that everybody was looking at him, and this one fellow was holding an umbrella for the lady and, taking care of her. So Ramanuja asked his disciple, who is this fellow? And he said, he's a very powerful wrestling champion and then everything. So Ramanuja called him, asked him to come near. And then he said, why are you behaving like this? This is not befitting a Kshatriya to behave like this in the public, right? So why are you behaving like this? This is not good, right? You are supposed to, why are you behaving like this? And then, what forces you? And then he explained, I've never seen, anything beautiful like the eyes of my wife. It's so beautiful. It's out of the world and it captivates my heart so much that I want to serve her all the time. So then Ramanuja said, what if I can show you an eyes more beautiful than that? And then he said, no way that you can show me anything more beautiful than the eyes of my wife. Now you're enamored, they have this Miss Universe like that. He was completely enamored by that. Then Ramanuja said, what if I do? Then he says, then if that is the case, then I'll give up all these bad habits, of going around serving my wife in public and all those PDA, public display of affection, very famous nowadays. So then, then he agreed. Then, Ramanuja tied his eyes and, took him. He took him all the way into the Srirangam temple, into the deity room. And then he opened the eyes. He asked him to open the eyes. And the first thing he saw was the eyes of Ranganath. And when he saw the eyes of the Lord, the deity, he became amazed by the beauty of it. Right? And then he said, my wife's eyes is nothing compared to the beautiful eyes of the Lord. Right? And then he immediately surrendered to Ramanuja and he became later a very, very famous disciple of Ramanuja. Actually, there was a place where, it was shown that how he and his wife, they were so more renounced than all the sannyasis, who were disciples of Ramanuja. So the point is that the Lord's beauty is such that it will captivate us so strongly. Right? So then the question may ask, this guy lived in Srirangam all the time. Right? He lived in Srirangam all the time. He obviously would have gone to the temple. Right? Why is that, he was not enamored before, because then, he was more enamored by the wife. And that's where one of the other acharyas gives an explanation that the Lord is very beautiful. He is very captivating. There is no doubt about it. But we have no capability to see the beauty of the Lord. We have no capability to see the beauty of the Lord. And Gorgon Maharaj, when he explains the only way to see the darshan of the Lord is when we get the mercy of the spiritual master. He explains that the mercy of the spiritual master is like lotus honey. We compare the lotus feet of the feet of the spiritual master to lotus. He always said lotus feet, lotus feet. The reason he explains is that is the honey that comes from lotus is very special. Why? Because in Ayurveda, that honey is used to cure eye disease. So if the honey Padma, they call it Padma Madhu. Right? Madhu means honey. Padma Madhu means honey from the Padma flowers, which is lotus. That actually cures eye diseases. So one who has got that honey, he can, his eyesight becomes better and can he see. Similarly, one who gets the mercy of the spiritual master by serving his lotus feet, when that mercy is applied, then we can see the form of the Lord. And once we see the form of the Lord, we'll become so captivated, there is no question of anything. One of the Alvars also is writing in one of his poems that the eyes that have seen the Lord can never look at any material thing. It loses its capability to appreciate material happiness. Because this all looks like, stale thing once we see the beauty of the Lord. It's like, somebody is very hungry, right? And then they give him stale food, it looks great. Right, you give a stale food, I have a bread that is in the expired and it's like 10 days old. It smells, then I take it and throw it away. And then if somebody is a homeless person who has nothing to eat, who has not eaten for a few days, for him it will look great. But the moment you give him another big plate, you put a big banana leaf and rice, dal, sabji, everything nicely you serve. The moment he sees this food, he will not go near the stale bread. Right? Similarly, a person who has seen the Lord, one who has got the mercy of the spiritual master, and the mercy of the spiritual master who has seen the beauty of the Lord, he can never get attached to anything material because it will all look stale. It will look dirty. Right? And that's why Yamunacharya in his song, he writes actually, one who has seen Krishna, for him, one who has, had this happiness in this spiritual happiness, even a little bit of spiritual happiness, for him the sex life, which is considered the greatest of all material happiness, would look like stool, right? Because the happiness that we derive is, unlimited. And here it also talks about, that's what it talks about. Lotus feet are the refuge of pure devotees who never talk or sing, right? Of anything except the Lord, because the mind becomes captivated by Krishna. The Rupa Goswami writes, when he talks about Harinam, holy name of Krishna, he talks about this particular verse, which was very, very wonderful, because when, he writes this verse where he says the word Krishna, the two syllables Krishna, he says, when I chant this name, I desire millions of mouths and unlimited ears, because one mouth is not enough to, taste the sweetness of this particular holy name. And then he says, I desire unlimited ears to hear it, and then it goes inside and completely captivates my mind. That's what he writes about Harinam. See how, and when Mahaprabhu read that verse, he was amazed. He shows that verse to Swarup Damodar and says, how can somebody have such a deep realization of the holy name of the Lord? It is not possible. It is such a deep realization because he has observed the holy name into him. And then that's where Swarup Damodar laughs and says, why are you making fun of me? You are, you are the puppet master and we are all puppets. If he has written this verse, it means that, you have made him realize the holy name so deeply. So one who has tasted that holy name, for him, anything else doesn't matter. It looks very stale. So that's exactly the sentiment that's explained in verse 26. And in 27, we go, as the Lord passed along the public road of Dwaraka, his head was protected from the sunshine by a white umbrella. White feathered fans moved in semicircles and showers of flowers fell upon the road. His yellow garments and garlands of flowers made it appear as if a dark cloud were surrounded simultaneously by sun, moon, lightning, and rainbows. The purport is very wonderful. If any of you have time, please read this purport. Srila Prabhupada writes a wonderful purport about how There is no way that we can see sun, moon, lightning, and rainbow all at the same time. Right? Particularly when there is clouds. So Srila Prabhupada is writing, this is an amazing thing about the Lord, the inconceivable potency of the Lord, that dark, because he's dark, Shyama, he's like a dark cloud, right? And at the same time, it is said that he, the sun and moon, everything, they pale in comparison to the Lord. Even the lotus feet of the Lord, Nitai Pada Kamala Kodi Chandra Susitala, right? It's like crores and crores of moons to put together. It's like the lotus feet nail of Nityananda Prabhu. So then Krishna, is like darkish, and then, there's a lightning at the same time, and there's a sun and moon and rainbow, everything. It's like an explosion of everything happening at the same time. And Srila Prabhupada writes, the adjustment is possible only when we think of the inconceivable potency of the Lord. So it's a very beautiful purport. So we'll go ahead. Text 28. After entering the house of his father, he was embraced by his mother's present, and the Lord offered his obeisances unto them by placing his head at their feet. The mothers were headed by Devaki, his real mother. So the next verse talked about, Krishna paying obeisances to all mothers. So then there are, Prabhupada in the purport talks about 7 mothers: the real mother, the wife of spiritual master, the wife of a Brahmana, the wife of a king, Gomata, which is cow, then the nurse who helped the birth, and then finally the Mother Earth. So it said that Krishna offered obeisances to all 7 of them, particularly because one thing that is very important in Vedic culture is the position of mother. The position of mother has to be very highly respected. Because in the question that was asked between Yudhishthira Maharaja and Yamadharmaraj during Yaksha Prashna in Mahabharata, is a part where Yamadharmaraja asks question and Yudhishthira answers. And there is a question that is asked is, what is heavier than earth? Right? That was a question that was asked. And what is higher than, what is higher than sky? And in answer to that question, Yudhishthira Maharaj answers, one's mother is heavier than earth and one's father is higher than sky. It's the answer Yudhishthira Maharaj gives. Particularly the relationship of mother is very heavily to be respected. In Apasamba Sutra, Yajnavalkya, he writes, even if the mother does abominable activity, she should not be abandoned by her son. Right? If a father does abominable activities, he should be abandoned. But a mother cannot be abandoned. Mother should always be respected because she carried us in her tummy for 10 months. We can't carry one object in our hand for 5 minutes, right? Whereas we see that the mother, she carries us for 10 months. So mother has to be heavily respected. That's why if you see even sannyasis are at the top, right? You have Varnashrama, Shudra, then Vaishya, then Kshatriya, then Brahmana, right? In terms of ashrama, Shudra can have only one ashrama, Grahastha ashrama. He cannot be brahmachari, he can't be vanaprastha, and no. For a Vaishya, there are 2. He can be a brahmachari and later he can become a Grahastha. Kshatriya can have 3. He can be a brahmachari, then later he becomes a Grahastha, then vanaprastha. He can't take sannyas. Kshatriya can't take sannyas. Only Brahmanas can take all the 4 ashramas. Right? And only he can take sannyas. And even among Brahmanas, the sannyasi is considered the topmost. Everybody in the society have to pay dandavats to the sannyasi. Right? Even one's father, if he is a grahastha and his son is a sannyasi, he should do dandavats. But the only position for which a sannyasi should still pay respect is his mother. That's why we see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after he took sannyas, he accepted the instruction of his mother who said, you stay in Puri, Jagannath Puri. And then he even ate prasadam cooked by her. And we see that in all the great acharyas cases, Adi Shankara himself, who was considered a perfect sannyasi, he came back to do the Shraddha ceremony for his mother when she passed away, after he took sannyas. So the position of mother is considered very supreme in the Vedic culture, particularly in Varnashrama system. And Krishna is setting an example. Devaki by nature, she is very spiritual. Even if she is not a mother, she is a pure devotee of the Lord. But still, the context is set here, right? How the mother, and the relationship is established. And the mother has always to be respected and taken care. Text 29. The mothers, after embracing their son, sat him on their laps. Due to pure affection, milk sprang from their breast. They were overwhelmed but with delight, and the tears from their eyes wetted the Lord. So, the affection that we see for the mothers to Krishna is ever new. It's like a newborn. Krishna is like, the mother, they generally produce milk when the baby is very small. Whereas we see that happens even now. Krishna has gone all the way, maybe 125 years old, but still it is happening because that relationship is eternal. The factor, yesterday we were hearing from Maharaj, right? There's no, there's no concept of time that affects the Dwarakavasis because they are spiritual. There is no impact of time on them. For them, Krishna is always, we say that even in material world, we say, right? A son will remain a son for the mother all the time. Even after he is grown up, the mother will treat him like a small boy. And then, in spiritual world, it is actually true because, there is no impact of time. Text 30. Thereafter, the Lord entered his palaces, which were perfect to the fullest extent. His wives lived in them, and they numbered over 16,000. So, Srila Prabhupada talks about in the purport how Krishna had 16,000 white wives, and all the houses were made with marble, best marble stone, better than Italian marble, pure white marble. Nowadays, I don't think so we even get that quality marble anymore. So with all were, with golden pillars studded with gems and, opulent 16,100 wife. So this opulence, Prabhupada talks about how this opulence is unlimited. And then in the next, in the next purport, in the next verse purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about how, because this verse, it talks about how Krishna simultaneously entered all the palaces. He didn't just go to Rukmini or Satyabhama or Jambavati, one of the palaces. He went to each one of the palaces at the same time simultaneously. All 16,000 palaces why? So Prabhupada writes about how Krishna, for him 16,000 is actually nothing. Even if he goes, Prabhupada writes exactly this word. He says, even if he has 16,000 million wives, still it is nothing for Krishna. For his potency, it is nothing because God is great. When we say God is great, we don't understand the meaning of the word great. That's what Prabhupada writes in the purport. He explains very beautifully that, the Lord is always great in all respects. God is great is an eternal truth. So the purport, here we see that Krishna, he entered all the palaces simultaneously. Text 31. The queens of Lord Krishna rejoiced within their minds to see their husband home after a long period abroad. The queens got up at once from their seats and meditations, as was socially customary. They covered their faces shyly and looked about coyly. So, now it goes more deeper. He enters the palace, and first it talked about how Krishna reacted to public. Right now, it talks about particularly the devotees who are in Madhurya Bhav. Because they are all wives of Krishna. So it talks about Madhurya Bhav, and so that is taken separately. Right? And the previous verse was Vatsalya Bhav. It talks about the mothers, and before that was Sakya and Dasya. So we talked about how he greeted the friends, how he greeted the Dasyas and the servants and everybody, the Brahmanas, they were all in Shantaras. So he treated everybody. That those three were finished. And then there was one specific verse for Vatsalya, two verses for Vatsalya verse, and the rest, it talks about Madhurya verse. It talks about, Krishna's relationship with his queens. So the queens, by nature, because they were women and, women are by nature has this shy attitude more. In modern society, shyness is actually, considered a disease. Recently, I was reading an article which talks about, in US, some of the medical companies, they are developing a medicine to get out of shyness. Whereas here it is considered as a great quality. Prabhupada actually, even in one of the previous purports, he says shyness is a great gift of nature to women. Through her shyness, she can actually control men. Prabhupada writes, and there is a company which wants to get rid of all those things. That's how demoniac society we are living in. So the queens, they were very shy and coy, and even though, so Prabhupada in the next few verses we will read about it, talks about the emotional state of the Madhurya devotee, right? So here particularly, Srila Prabhupada talks about how how a woman should behave. Particularly in Vedic culture, there were very strict protocols, not only for women. There were very strict protocols for how men should behave, Brahmana should behave, how Kshatriya should behave, how Vaishyas should behave, how Sudras. Everybody had very strict rules, and they were trained up from a very young age to to be in that same setup, so that it becomes natural for them to follow the rules. So women were by nature were not allowed to associate freely with other men and things like that. So even when they talk to men, even if it is their husband, there was always this aspect of shyness and coyness that stops them at a certain level. Whereas here, so their nature, their bringing up, and all those factors are affecting them, but still their love for Krishna is so strong that it overpowers their nature, right? So basically, when we talk about giving up varnashrama dharma, people say that we should give up varnashrama dharma. Yeah, we have to give up varnashrama dharma when we come to bhakti. But then there is, sometimes we take it the other way around, because, for example, let's say honesty. Oh, devotee, we don't have to be honesty. We can tell lies for Krishna. That can be true for Yudhishthira, right? Because he was honest and he was giving up honesty. For a person who never was honest, there is no question of giving up honesty. So we can't say, by nature, if I have a habit of telling lies, there is no question of telling lies for Krishna. Right? First, I have to become honest, then I can, tell lies for Krishna. So it is sometimes we jump this step, So, we have to go through that step. Otherwise, what we do is from, tamogun, we are trying to do devotional service, then it becomes Sahajiya platform. So we have to come to that platform. That's what Srila Prabhupada talks about, first bring yourself to the Sattvic platform, and then you have to give up everything in Sattva Guna as well. There's no doubt about it. So here, whatever qualities that are talked, there are two aspects to it. One is the Varnashrama aspect to it, and the other one is how it plays in the Leela of Krishna. Because if there is no shyness, there is no question of the women overcoming their shyness, right? And when they have shyness, and when they overcome the shyness because their love is overpowering, that will be attractive to Krishna, right? Then Krishna sees, they have some restriction and they are ready to give up even that restriction for the sake of me. Then that sweetness of that love is what is manifested. Otherwise, what we are doing is mostly in Tamogun. So we have to be very careful about that. And Srila Prabhupada talks about this particularly in context to the from the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's purport. I'll read that. According to Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, there was a regular psychological reaction at the occasion. First of all, rising from their streets, although they wanted to see their husband, they were deterred because of feminine shyness. But due to strong ecstasy, they overcame the stage of weakness and became caught up with the idea of embracing the Lord. And this thought factually made them unconscious of their surrounding environment. So Srila Prabhupada talks about, warring emotions. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he talks about one side, you're by nature shy, you can't approach and, talk to somebody. But at the same time, the love is overpowering. It makes you, get up and go and, hug them. So there are like two emotions simultaneously happening. And then they become unconscious, right? You will see that pretty much in all the pure devotees, particularly Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We see that, the moment he will hear a verse, he'll go unconscious. And because there are multiple emotions at the same time, it can happen, in the body of a pure devotee. What we have is nothing. We have emotions. It's actually very dry compared to what the devotees have, because there are multiple emotions. In Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami talks about this very strongly, very beautifully, about how multiple emotions appear simultaneously in a devotee, right? Radharani particularly, how so many emotions appear at her, in her, manifest at her at the same time, contradicting emotions to each other, right? And he says that that's why many devotees, they can't, this material body is useless to them, because this material body cannot take it. It's not capable of taking so much emotion and bhava, actually. It is not, only spiritual body can take that. And it looks like even spiritual body sometimes becomes overwhelmed by the emotions and they become unconscious, as we see in the case of the Queens of Dwaraka or Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 32. The insuperable ecstasy was so strong that the queens who were shy first embraced the Lord in the innermost recesses of their hearts. Then they embraced him visually, and then they sent their sons to embrace him, which is equal to personal embracing. But, O chief among the Brigus, though they tried to restrain their feelings, they inadvertently shed tears. So now the intensity of the love of these devotees are explained, and their stages of how they approach the Lord, right? So everything has to go through. If we go through anything in a very measured way, the ecstasy keeps on increasing. We see that how they approach the Lord, right? First they embraced him in their heart, then through their eyes, then they send their sons, right? Then there is a level of ecstasy keeps on increasing. It's like in modern world, everybody jumps day one. The moment they say they hug, and it is all about physical relationship and finished, right? But whereas the Baba, the more and more intense it is, it can express in multiple ways, right? First, embracing Krishna in the heart, you can do that, and then there is embracing through the eyes, and then embracing through their sons, and then physically embracing. There are multiple levels of embracing Krishna. There are many aspects to it. But the problem with the material world is we can't conceive all these things because we are very mundane, right? So conceiving this is very difficult. For example, it is explained in the Shastra that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also talks about how embracing in visually is more powerful than actually physically embracing. It is said in the, I think, Ananda Vrindavan Champu, or I'm not sure which book. In one place, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Radharani has never told Krishna, I love you. She has never expressed that feeling because there is an idea in the Vedic culture that you express that feeling, it will go away because you are opening your, the moment it comes out, it will become. So again, to go back to today's world, it's considered great if you express your feelings. But, in spiritual world, it's about holding the feeling back. And then, it's like, building a dam, and what overflows the dam is actually more attractive to Krishna than, opening up everything. So these are all very subtle elements of love, and we can never perceive it or understand it until we are established in that platform. Only when we go to that platform, when we go to that level, then we can understand all these different levels. Of first embracing in the heart, then we can't even understand the difference between these two. What I'm looking at Krishna, what is we can't perceive it. But when that factor is the factor is love, then each will have a different value to us. Each will give a different feeling to us back, and each will give a different reciprocation to us. And that's why that's all explained in Bhagavatam, because this is considered the topmost of all the literatures. Text 33. Although Lord Sri Krishna was constantly by their sides as well as exclusively alone, his feet appeared to them to be newer and newer. The goddess of fortune, although by nature always restless and moving, could not quit the Lord's feet. So what woman can be detached from those feet, having once taken shelter of them? So this is a wonderful verse, Srila Prabhupada also talks in the purport about how millions and millions of, Lakshmi are serving the lotus feet of Krishna. And at the same time, even though they are serving Krishna, Lakshmi never leaves the lotus feet of the Lord. She is constantly engaged, and she is also associating with him in a very personal level, in a very exclusive way, right? Only sometimes, even when Vishnu and Lakshmi are there, even Brahma cannot just enter Vaikuntha. He has to wait outside the milk ocean, chant the Purusha Shukta prayers. Then if Vishnu wants, he can give darshan. Whereas Lakshmi is a very personal association all the time. But still, for her, Krishna appears new and new every time. There is no end to, that beauty of the Lord. And the other thing that the last verse, the what women can be detached from those feet having taken shelter, Srila Prabhupada translates in a very beautiful way. He says, all jivas are feminine by nature. So he translates as when that verse says, all the women, so what women can be detached from those feet? He's saying, oh, no, given that all of us are women, none of us can give up the shelter of the lotus feet once we have taken shelter. So particularly for devotees, this is very wonderful that once we come into devotional service, there is no question of taking shelter of anything else. There is no question of thinking of anything else. Then, Bhagavatam also later tells in a very strong way, it chastises devote or person who comes to spiritual life and gives up spiritual life. He says like it's like somebody who vomited food and then eats the vomit back. That's the comparison that's given in Bhagavatam, right? Because material thing is like that. Once you have tasted Krishna, there is no question of giving up Krishna. It's so sweet. And so Prabhupada translated that all of us are feminine by nature, and so that once we engage in the service of the Lord, anything we want can be worked within the service of the Lord. He talks about, somebody wants power, he wants to become a servant in the government. He says, become a servant of Krishna. There is no one superior to Krishna. So when you become, a servant of Krishna, you become. So there is nothing that is outside the devotional service, because Krishna himself is inside the devotional service. He is controlled by devotional service, and Krishna controls everything else. So only one who has immatured, they will give up Krishna consciousness. Text 34. The Lord was pacified after killing those kings who were burdensome to the earth. They were puffed up with their military strength, their horses, elephants, chariots, infantry, etc. He himself was not a party in the fight. He simply created hostility between the powerful administrators, and they fought among themselves. He was like the wind which causes friction between bamboos and sows sparks of fire. It's a very interesting verse, because this talks about samsara dava. On one hand, every day morning we are seeing samsara dava nalalita loka. There is a forest fire, the mercy of spiritual master, let it burn, let that fire be, put away by his mercy. And on the other side, in this verse, it says Krishna is the one who is the cause of the forest fire, which is burning the material world. So why? Because Krishna acts as a forest fire for those who are puffed up material. It's very important verse, because this idea of having any kind of pride in the heart is a fall down for any kind of spirituality, whether it is tapasya, yoga, karma yoga, anything. Anywhere pride comes, it will destroy, particularly bhakti. As we see in the previous classes, when Advaita Acharya asked Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I want you to give this prema to everybody. And then Mahaprabhu said, okay. He said, no, stop. I haven't finished my full sentence. You give this prema to everybody indiscriminately except for those who has pride in their heart. So pride is something that will destroy our devotional service. Right? All these kings, even Jarasandha was actually a devotee of Vishnu. He used to worship Shaligram. He was a devotee of Vishnu. Prabhupada talks about Jarasandha devotees in one of his classes. He says, don't be a Jarasandha devotee. Right? Why? Even though he was worshipping Krishna, why he couldn't understand Krishna? Because the pride was there in his heart. Same with Duryodhana. All these people, they had two things that were stopping. One was envy of devotees, and the other one was pride. If these two are there, they will not allow us to see Krishna. So somebody may say, I've been chanting for many years, but I don't feel any happiness. I don't, feel any spiritual advancement. That means the envy and pride is very strong in the heart. That is the root cause of why we are not able to perceive the happiness of spiritual life. So, here it is said, Krishna specifically acts like a forest fire. He doesn't have to do anything. The other thing is the verse talks about how Krishna didn't actually partake in the war. He didn't take a weapon to kill all these people. All he had to do was just create a friction. Why? Because the forest fire, the fire is inside the wood. That's how the Shastra talks. The fire is inside the wood. When it's just that the brushing of the woods just brings the fire outside, which burns them. Similarly, the pride is the fire in the heart. And if two people have pride or two people have envy, the moment they come in contact with each other, they will burn each other. So pride and envy will not only burn others, it will burn us as well. So we should be very careful when we become a devotee that we start giving up this pride, this idea, right? So anytime, so then the question asks, how do I give up pride? Is we understand we are insignificant. We always keep that in mind. Anytime somebody chastises us, we should accept it. Anytime somebody praises us, we should immediately keep it. It doesn't belong to me, it belongs to my spiritual master or the Lord. through him, we give it to the Lord. So if we don't follow this particular etiquette, what would happen is that the pride will enter and then we'll lose what we have. So as devotees, we should be very conscious that we don't do this. So we'll finish the class here. Today we are finishing a little early because we have Maharaj here, so we have his class next. So any questions? Prabhu, do you have any questions? No? I have Jitendra Prabhu with me, so okay. So no questions. As I said, so we'll continue with the next words. We'll finish this chapter next week and probably start the next chapter as well next week. So if you have any questions, you can message me. I'll have my number, and then I'll start with the questions next week. So we are finishing a little early this week because of some services. So we'll thank you all for joining. Vrindara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Gurudev ki jai, Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bo.